Hi there, Guy from Midwinter Minis here. In this video I'm going to show you how to paint up Amallyn Shadowguide from Blackstone Fortress in a quick and effective colour scheme. Before we get going, two things. First, watch out when handling Amallyn's rifle. It's very fragile, and I've seen a lot of people saying about how parts have broken off when painting or playing. Secondly, no Penny today unfortunately. She's on a night shift saving lives, so you're stuck with me. Apologies in advance. To make your priming more efficient, and as this is the first video covering one of the heroes, I would recommend adding your base elements and priming the heroes at the same time. If you're going to be painting along with me, here's how we'll prime them. For Amallyn, UR025 and Tadeus use white primer. For Rhine, Rouse, Dayak and Janus, use grey primer. For Pius and Esbern, use black. And thanks to our donors like Eric, Lee, Darren and Robert, I'm slowly improving my setup to make better videos for you. New for this video is this cool little stopwatch, so I'll be using it to keep track of how long each mini or project takes me. So let's start the timer and begin. First off, we'll use our green paint, rarely used in this series so far, to paint the cloak. This particular paint I'm using is quite transparent, so it will definitely need 2 thin coats. Try to be a little bit careful around the borders of the armour, which for this scheme we want to try to keep white. And while you're watching me build up the green, a huge thanks to Alan, Colin, Hamish and Andrew for donating since the last video. Those are some mighty Scottish names you've got there. It's a shame that Penny isn't here to read them out in her Borders voice. Now if you accidentally get green on any areas you want to keep white, quickly touch them up with the thinned white paint. It might not totally cover the mistakes as white acrylic tends to be very transparent, but it'll do for now. Taking a look at the timer, we're now at 14.5 minutes of hands-on painting time. Not a bad start. Next we'll mix up our white paint with our flesh tone in a 1:1 mix, thinned with a little water, and paint the small area of exposed face using our detail brush. Once that's taken care of, crack out your black paint, thin it so it flows nicely, and paint the base of the model, including any debris you've added. And do your best not to accidentally get any black on her boots or cape. Now grab your grey paint and using your standard brush paint the cable that connects her rifle to her body and the main part of the sheath slung across her back. The black on the base will probably be dry now, so we'll use a technique called overbrushing to paint the debris. By painting over the parts rather than getting the point into the details, we'll leave the black showing in the recesses. We've done a simple grey dry brush on every other model of this series so far, but the colours and model are pretty delicate this time, so I want to keep things a bit more exact. And once you're happy with the grey, use a tiny bit of white paint to do the same thing, but try to catch less and leave the grey showing. So we're 23 minutes in. Before we move on to the wash stage, I'd like to thank our awesome donors like David, Stefan, Kieran and Conrad. With help from our supporters, I've been able to upgrade my lighting rig so everyone can enjoy better looking videos. Thanks again guys. In the next step, we'll create a wash to give the whole model some light definition. I mixed 1 drop of black wash, 1 drop of brown wash, and 4 drops of water to create a thin shade, and using my standard brush, applied it all over the model. It's best to prioritise the white, because if it dries and you're not finished the whole colour, the tide marks will be quite hard to shift later on. Once you've painted the entire model, go grab a coffee or watch an episode of something, and come back in about 30 minutes when everything should be dry. Next, we'll add some more colour. Mix 1 part of our blue paint with 2 parts of white, and use this baby blue to paint the blade, the coils of the rifle, and the stone hanging from her belt. "28 minutes of painting time so far, and it's definitely starting to come together. If you wanted to spend half an hour painting up a model, and maybe to what we'd call a board game standard, this is an easy way to do that with minimum fuss. Let's move on though, and use our brown wash to paint the cloak, the face, and the rifle stock. A massive thanks to Bilal, Dan, Adrian, and Aurélien for supporting Midwinter Minis. I'm blown away every week by the generosity of my viewers. I love reading and answering your comments, so if you've got any questions about this tutorial or anything else, just ask. And next up, we'll use our silver paint and detail brush to carefully pick out the gems on her armor, cloak, and rifle. There are a ton of these, so at some point you just have to decide that only the big ones count, or you'll just end up trying to catch every little bump, which will take you ages. With the gems taken care of, we'll add a touch of yellow to our green paint in about a 1:2 ratio, and use our detail brush to create vertical streaks on the cloak. As this is a highlight, we'll be careful not to go into any of the recesses and folds, and just make sure you catch the edges and top-facing parts you'd imagine the light would hit from. Now for the annoying bit. Everyone hates painting white, but we're going to use our thinned white paint to carefully pick out the prominent parts of the armor and rifle. You want the paint to be thin enough that it flows nicely and remains smooth, but not too watery that it starts flowing into the recesses when you get near them. This part was a real time sink, as the armor is so full of creases and panels that catching all of them is just a matter of patience. We'll also use our white to do a first for this series, edge highlighting. So, tilting your brush at a 45-degree angle to the edge of the blade, carefully trace the brush along it. It should catch and make a thin line along the edge, hence the name. I hate doing this, and I'm also not very good at it, so I try to never do it. We'll also use the white to just gently catch the central coils of our rifle, as well as a few facets on the stone hanging from our belt. Now, to enrich the blue, we'll create a blue wash with 1 drop of blue paint and 6 drops of water. Paint this onto the blade, stone, and coils using your standard brush. Now we'll use our black wash and detail brush to create some extra definition. Carefully paint her eyes with the black wash and use it in any of the recesses that you'd like to make darker. This will help boost the contrast of the miniature overall. And a quick shout out to April, who's painting along with this series with her awesome dad. Now pull out your black paint again and paint the bases and rims, and be careful to avoid the debris we painted earlier. And while you're watching me take care of that final step, big love to Alessandro, Andre, and Gideon for supporting the channel this week. You guys are ace. Thank you. And here's Amallyn Shadowguide. Finished in relatively simple steps, especially for such a detailed character, and ready to explore the Blackstone fortress. And this paint job took 74 minutes of active painting time to complete, and that's shorter than The Nightmare Before Christmas, so you can paint Amallyn instead of watching that for the millionth time, huh? In the next video, we'll be painting up everyone's favourite heretic-burning, chain-blading missionary, Pius Vaughn. So I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.